You live.
Hey, everybody, and welcome to the 58th week of the Free Assange Online Vigil. My name is Andrew Smith, and I'm joined tonight with co-hosts Misty and Steve. I can't actually pull the numbers up because my computer's freaking out, so I'm going to have someone else do that. But we are also joined, and we will pull him in just a second, special guest Jason Bermas. But if one of you could grab the
I can do
dates.
numbers. Okay, so we have 3,535 days of illegal and arbitrary detention for Julian Assange. We have 488 days since the WikiLeaks publisher was trafficked from the Ecuadorian embassy after being sold to the UK for a 4.2 billion IMF loan. We have 26 days until the second phase of Julian's show trial and rendition hearing. So get to DC. We have 1,166 days of incarceration for Reality Winner. And a little bit of good news, our always little shining ray of hope. We have 150 days of freedom for Chelsea Manning. So yeah, those are the numbers for today.
And just so everyone knows, we still have the same call to action out. I am asking that everybody reach out to their city council people. It's something this is the third week, and it'll be the final week that we put this out there. But Melbourne and other groups in Australia had a lot of success in getting city councils to speak up on behalf of Julian. So I'll be putting that link in the chat, and I'll hop over onto Jason's stream and put it into his chat for him as well. But we're just asking people to reach out to your local city council people while you're watching the Vigil tonight and share with them information about Julian. And on our website, we actually have a specific document that you can download and send to your city council people, which was the motion that was passed by the Melbourne City Council, Melbourne over in Australia, which is Julian's home city. So if you could take a look at that, and I will be dropping the link into the chats now for everybody. But one more side note, Chelsea Manning does have a Twitch stream. And that's something that we're encouraging everybody to go over there and show her some love. She does stream Thursdays, Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays, I believe, usually later in the evening, but her schedule is up on her Twitch. So if you could just pop over there and say thank you for being a war hero for literally the cause of knowing what the hell our government's doing. But with that, I want to say hi to a very special guest of ours, Jason Bermas. How are you today, my friend?
I am very good, and how are you?
We're doing pretty wonderful. So we have some interesting stuff we wanted to talk with you about and get your opinion, but I want to let someone else kind of jump in first before I go off into an article.
So I know that you did a short live stream about this a few days ago when the story broke, and we're going to get to it. It's about the lawsuit that Fox News filed where they have called for the testimony of Julian Assange. But before we do that, I think it would be fun really quickly, because this just happened like a couple hours ago, where the Delaware daughter sniffer, Grandpa Grow-Between, Sleepy Joe Biden, decided that in the middle of a summer where tens of thousands, if not, put together, approaching 1 million people have been out in the streets to ostensibly protest against police brutality. Joe Biden decides that he's going to put a cop on his presidential ticket. I would like to get some thoughts from my friends here about this. I guess I don't know, mind-numbingly and dangerously stupid decision that the DNC has made. So you could jump in whenever.
I mean, let me just jump in quick on this. I don't think we can even call him Sleepy Joe at this point. He's progressed from like Joey B. I showed the clip of him at the CFR earlier today. Where he still had a little snap to his step, son of a bitch, they fired him. I didn't give him the $1 billion. He's gone from Joey B to Sleepy Joe. That's the guy you probably saw at the debates where he was confused about record players in life, and he's got hairy legs. And now we've progressed to Zombie Joe, where other people are deciding everything. They only bring him out about 3 or 4 days. He can no longer string a 90-second thought together without stopping, making a mistake, literally closing his eyes and shaking. So Zombie Joe doesn't have anything to do with this decision at all. He's there for window dressing. Now, Kamala Vampiris, that's another thing. This is a sociopathic fucking cunt, man. Like, this is the kind of, I've said this before, you know, Willie Brown, I actually brought her up today on a Rockfin exclusive, but Willie Brown, who had her as his mistress, this is who he was cheating on his wife with, folks. Mr. Establishment Willie Brown, Mr. Bohemian Grove Willie Brown, Mr. San Francisco Willie Brown, Mr. I got a call on the morning of 9/11 not to fly Willie motherfucking Brown, okay? He said that she shouldn't take the VP because it wasn't powerful enough, and she should take the AG. So already there you could tell that the offers were on the table. However, I think she wants the moniker. I think she wants the notoriety. She knows if they are able to rig this, she's not the vice president. After all, yeah, 60% of Democrats are like begrudgingly admitting now that they don't think Joe Biden will serve 4 years as president if he's elected. 4 years? Motherfucker ain't serving 4 hours. That guy, no. So this is like, to me, the most outward selection of the diversity sociopath that they were able to just put out in the debates as a legitimate candidate. And it's another frightening step into 2020, Steve.
Well,
you know,
the thing to keep in
really
mind too is Biden was also floating the name Gretchen Whitmer to have as his running mate. And for people who don't know, Gretchen Whitmer's daddy is a CEO for Anthem Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Like literally her father is on the board of Blue Cross and Blue Shield. And she is also a person that banned seeds and literally everything except processed food products during the initial stages of the COVID-19 lockdown, to the point that an armed resistance stormed the Michigan State Capitol building to try to reclaim at least some personal independence and self-function. So I think it's, I don't know, like as far as people that he could choose, why not pick someone that supports slavery like Kamala Harris? Like this is the guy that wrote the crime bill that made crack multiple times more illegal than cocaine, even though ounce for ounce it contains less of the actual substance that gets you high.
My favorite thing about Kamala Harris, and this is I've lived in California now for almost 20 years. But when she ran for attorney general, her opponent was this guy who was basically a poster child for the Lebensborn, just blonde-haired, blue-eyed, like proud, authoritarian, borderline Nazi. And she won her race by less than 1% of a point, as I guess she was trying to bill herself as a progressive district attorney or something like that. But she barely beat out a Nazi and then had like the unmitigated gall to walk around in her miserably failing presidential candidate trying to tout her record to the point to where Tulsi Gabbard opened her mouth for about 2.5 minutes and just completely destroyed that woman's chances of getting anywhere near the Oval as an elected official. Now she could do it as Joe Biden's VP because, Jason, I think you're right. Harris is there because it would be a little bit too obvious if he would have selected Hillary Clinton. So they selected, slightly more tan Hillary Clinton with a slightly less, not much, but slightly less visceral emotional recoil reaction from the general public every time they see her, she opens her mouth. But this is Hillary Clinton and the Hillary Clinton faction of the Democratic Party saying we're on the ticket, and old Joey B is gonna have a slip and a fall, or he's just gonna go to sleep on the night of the inauguration and not wake up, and then we'll have President Kamala Harris and whatever shit show she unleashes on the world if they manage to steal this election. And I don't know if that's going to happen or not.
Brother, listen, the way the hysteria is, I just want to put this out there. I can't put anything past these people. Number one, if you just have a few states out there that go to this mail-in voting system, we're not getting a result on November 4th, no matter what. We're not getting one on the 5th. We're not getting one on the 15th. We might not get one December 1st because there's going to be so much contesting one way and the other. And when we talk about Kamala Harris, I want to remind everybody that I stand by my statements that I believe this is the type of woman that would sit there at a holiday dinner and cook with another woman and smile in her face while she is sleeping with her husband behind the scenes and then banging her son when he gets home from college on vacation. She is a fucking sociopath. You can see it in her actions. You can see it in her voice. You can see it in her face. She is a politician, a prosecutor that put people in jail for longer than their sentences. Again, nothing has to make sense, right? Like the right will run with that cop theme and the left will just make, like that doesn't exist or it's some kind of smear. It's just like Trump again signs an executive order, which is Bernie Sanders on crack against Big Pharma. And Bernie Sanders himself and the rest of the left have remained completely silent, man. We're in bizarro world. We're here.
Well, let's talk about this is actually a giant fuck you to Bernie Sanders voters, to progressives, which I am not either of those things. But at some point they have to recognize how ridiculous this is. I mean, this is a double. It's insane how obviously this is a giant fuck you to the entire progressive movement. I mean, Kamala Harris, like you guys said earlier, in the midst of Black Lives Matter protests across the country and overwhelming calls to defund the police, they chose the cop. Come on.
Well, it'll prevent right-wing attacks because then they can't be anti-police if Kamala Harris is a cop.
And Joe Biden wrote the fucking crime bill. Like the problems that people have with the police right now, with our prison system, with the criminal justice in general. Like you can point to a couple specific individuals and say, were it not for these people and their efforts, it would not be this fucked up. Joe Biden is that guy. Kamala Harris is the one who said, as Misty just mentioned, no, you don't get out of jail yet, even though your sentence is up, because we need you for cheap labor and we need you to go fight forest fires in California.
And that's called slavery. I don't know if people are aware, but forced labor is called slavery. It's actually, you can look it up. It's called the 13th Amendment. There's a little caveat in there that says like, hey, we can't have slaves unless you're in prison.
I mean, on the Democratic ticket, we have a segregationist and a cop who supports slavery. We live in a fucking cartoon, right, Steve? I mean, that's basically what it is. This is the craziest timeline imaginable.
It's the stupidest timeline imaginable. I don't know if it's the craziest. Like, I can think of some crazier shit that could happen, but this is by far the stupidest timeline. And we all know why. It's because that marmot got stuck in the Large Hadron Collider in 2016, forcing a hard reset about 3 months before the presidential election. And ever since then, man, it's just been fucking nuts.
I still think there's a possibility that David Bowie was the glue holding everything together. And once he died, the world collapsed. That's my theory. That's the one I'm working with.
Well,
Jason, any David Bowie related conspiracy theories before we get to this article?
I absolutely zero David Bowie related conspiracy theories other than the non-conspiracy that he and Mick Jagger did have a sexual relationship. That seems to be 100% verified. And that video that they did together is not only hilarious for every reason, but awesome that the Family Guy played it start to finish in one of their episodes and not even an excerpt. That's all I got for you on that, Steve.
So let's go ahead and jump into this lawsuit that was filed. Let me pull up the actually before I go to the documents, I'll pull up the article real quick to kind of set the scene. Let me put it on the share here real quick. And we have an injured Sleepy Josh tonight, so we are we are teching on our own. And I hope that Josh heals up here very soon. Not only because it sucks to be in pain, but I have a show coming up on Sunday. So a U.S. federal judge has asked the U.K. to assist in facilitating the testimony of WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange in a civil suit against Fox News brought by the parents of slain DNC staffer Seth Rich. Am I reading the right fucking article here? Yeah, I am. Yeah, U.S. Magistrate Sarah Netburn said in a filing on Wednesday that Assange's evidence cannot be secured except by the intervention of English courts, and that such intervention would serve to further international interests of justice and judicial cooperation. This is fascinating. And like I said, Jason, I know that you have done a video on this. So if you want to set it up just a little bit while I pull up these documents, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. So the document's actually behind me. And this isn't I don't believe this is a new lawsuit. This is an extension of the lawsuit out there by Fox News defending that their stories about Seth Rich and Assange were actually true. And in these 20 questions that they are basically trying to use a precedent set by The Hague to get a video conference with Julian Assange. After all, they facilitated a ton of these video conferences overseas, especially during COVID 1984. You have 20 questions that not only ask the questions about Assange, but WikiLeaks, their relationship to Rich, but whether or not Russia itself, the GRU, or anybody affiliated with them, the FSB, the SVR, the FSPSI, had any role in the 2016 DNC emails released. Now, obviously, we know that Assange may not answer certain questions, but I think he would certainly answer number 20. And we all know how he would answer it. He would answer it the same way he's always answered that question, and that is that Russia did not facilitate those emails. So this is a 60-page document, but it contains the original lawsuit. There's only about, I think, 12 to 14 new relevant pages. But yeah, I thought this was extra encouraging. And then on top of that, before you guys came in, I was prepping the audience for this. There's another lawsuit now going on where Matt Couch is suing NPR, Michael Isikoff, and others that were involved in a Yahoo podcast series that defamed him and basically says he's a liar and the whole Seth Rich story is not true. So we have more and more lawsuits out there of people defending their work with the Seth Rich case, with the fact these emails did not originate from Russia. And I think this is extremely important because we may be able to put things on the record in civil court first rather than some kind of kangaroo federal court. Do I think it's going to work? I'm never hopeful. You know, every once in a while, you know, you get a Chelsea Manning commuted sentence. Every once in a while, you get a Harvey Weinstein prison sentence. So, you know, am I hopeful? No, but I do see these as avenues of people fighting back, and hopefully something will slip through the cracks.
You know, so every time that Ray McGovern's on, we have an opportunity to talk to him a little bit because he's been subpoenaed in one of these lawsuits, and there are multiple ones out as far as I remember. My hope ultimately is that no matter how long of a process it takes, regardless of who wins the lawsuit, we will actually be able to get to look at court transcripts and 100% know, finally, yes, Seth Rich was the person who leaked these to the DNC, or no, he wasn't, but we may be able to figure out who did. At some point, it's there. I wish that the people who murdered this man were brought to justice. That's what I wish. And there's so many suspicious circumstances surrounding him, and there's so many, like, why would the mayor of DC need to be at the hospital? Why would Donna Brazil need to be at the hospital? Like, this is just, it's maddening. And for it to be dismissed as some sort of like right-wing conspiracy theory shows the level of both dedication and desperation on behalf of liberal intelligence class, pundit class, and political class.
What I find the most disturbing is that you're not even allowed to talk about it. Like if you even well, I mean, I do, but if you talk about it, you're labeled a kook and a crazy conspiracy theorist. And, it's ridiculous. It's an unsolved murder of a DNC employee around an election time when WikiLeaks just happened to produce a bunch of Democratic Party crap. So the fact that it's like a taboo subject that you can't talk about or you shouldn't talk about is completely ridiculous. And it really just speaks to how prevalent and how effective the propaganda campaign and then the smear campaign to maintain the propaganda campaign really is. And it sucks because, like Steve said, I just want some justice for this kid. I mean, it would just be nice for, the system to work for the people for once and for him to get some justice for what happened to him.
Well, the problems, we're stuck in a point in history of collective lying to ourselves. Like as a society, we have this massive issue with literally lying to ourselves and our neighbors and our friends and family about what the hell's going on. And Russiagate is a perfect example because of how easily it had holes shot in it. But another example of this is something that Jason has exposed so beautifully his entire life. It's the way that 9/11 has been recorded through history, even though most people know the textbook definitions of it are bullshit. The same thing can be said for the way society is treating coronavirus, and even the way society treats Julian. By the whole he hurt people or he's a rapist thing, when all it takes is a little cognitive effort and that just falls away.
I absolutely agree with you, brother. And even today, I was watching Trump's clip from yesterday where he was talking about Brennan, Clapper, all these people that were involved in spying on his campaign. And he's like, they've never been caught before doing something like this. And then today I did a watch along with my film Invisible Empire and New World Order Defined. And Peter Dale Scott is sitting there talking about basically Iran-Contra and the October surprise, where all of a sudden they had these hostages. And on the day they inaugurated Reagan, they let him go. And that absolutely there were backdoor deals with the establishment backing George H.W. Bush, Ronald Reagan, Rockefeller, Brzezinski at the time. They just never got caught in that respect, But right now, where the information is definitely in your face, love Trump or hate him, there are so many people still in denial that Obamagate exists, and they did try to set this guy up, and that Russiagate doesn't have any merit, Andrew.
And the other big thing too, about the whole Russiagate facade is the fact that it's still being pushed. Like, it's been debunked from every which direction. Reality Winner released documents that showed that the U.S. intelligence agency honestly had no idea what the hell was even going on in our country at this time, probably because the majority of it was dedicated to infiltrating and spying on Donald Trump's campaign. But the fact that they can still run a headline and say Russia did it and be taken as serious, because we have content creators like you, Jason, that get removed from YouTube essentially because you're considered harmful or dangerous content, when there's people that literally go out and lie us into wars on a regular basis that get the ad revenue, the promotional spots, and the placements by YouTube.
Well, you know what? Even this week, Ford Fisher, I know Ford. I actually saw him in D.C. when I was with you guys in that initial Assange action. I want to remind people, September is just around the corner. Action for Assange absolutely needs your help. Go to actionforassange.com to financially support him and get him out there. But Ford Fisher, let me see if I can actually bring it up right here. We'll scroll down a while. He basically put up a video that was a press conference of an anti-fascist and his lawyer right here. Okay, and it's an 11-minute clip, and it says that a human reviewer found it to be hateful content and violent after a manual review. Here's the thing. The same exact footage licensed by Ford Fisher to now this is fully monetized. So it shows you, I mean, the same exact clip, the same exact content by an authoritative source, you're allowed to monetize it. But if you're Ford Fisher, who certainly isn't Luke Radowski or Jason Bermas or, Andrew Smith or Steve Poikonen, he's basically a guy that puts out 99% of just the same exact material. Again, frame for frame, word for word, the same content, demonetized for Ford, is monetized for Now This. And people think Now This is this hip alternative platform. Yeah, Now This, it's like the new Vice. Oh, so cool. And you never get an actual independent voice. You know what I mean? The actual raw footage. So that just shows you all the selective enforcement. Luckily, I know that my audience was aware of this, but my GoFundMe's got frozen out of nowhere 2 days ago. And then today they said that it was some kind of a processing glitch. So apparently I wasn't really up for review. There was no talk of harmful content. And I supposedly have access. But when you see people like Dan Dix get purged from platforms like GoFundMe, that is also extremely worrisome. And we're in an age, Andrew, of more censorship than ever.
And then it comes down to Fox News having to get Julian pulled in on a lawsuit to actually be able to have this presented in a way that people will actually listen, which is fucking crazy to me that it's Fox News that is doing the heavy lifting on this, while at the same time had removed the article that they're being sued over and didn't even have the balls to stand by a well-vetted article in regards to Seth Rich, but then still continue this lawsuit even though they don't stand by the information that they have.
Their own work.
Right.
We're not going to stand by our own work, but it seems like we might be able to do a little grandstanding here. So let's go ahead and file this motion, and let's try and get this testimony. What I'm most interested in, I guess, and it's kind of a sidebar, but I think it's worth discussing here for a couple of minutes while we still have Jason, is the testimony that Julian Assange has already given in the Spanish case against UC Global and their founder, David Morales, and whether or not that will actually be allowed to be introduced into the rendition hearing. Do you have an opinion on that, Jay?
That's a great question. Again, when you're kind of in this kangaroo court system, anything could be possible. And there are some people that are saying that now these, I think, 17 charges, and then there's an 18th one that's somewhat separate, may be dropped, and a whole new indictment may be brought forth. And since we're in, COVID 1984 crazy, anything could be possible, right? I don't really know if I have an answer for you, because right now you still have a situation where this guy has been drug out physically of an embassy, is being tortured in prison, is being strip searched, right? When he is in court, he's put in a Hannibal Lecter style plastic box to keep him away from his lawyers. It seems like they're going to do everything that they can to keep any kind of testimony that they don't get firsthand there. And they certainly don't want testimony in a civil case to be admissible or even to hit anywhere in the mainstream media, Steve. But again, sometimes we get pixies and fairy tales. Sometimes they go raid a New Hampshire hideout for one of the largest sex traffickers of the last several decades. You never know, right? And I guess I'm going to be watching and seeing. What's your opinion on whether or not we're even going to see these hearings coming up in September? You think that's actually going to happen?
I hope so, because we already booked the Airbnb. Look, it would be foolish of both President Trump and the possibility of an incoming President Biden for them to postpone these hearings. The reason that I heard that they were thinking about not going forward with it is because they wanted to wait until after the election. Well, for Trump, it's not like Joe Biden is going to put Julian Assange on the table during a debate. Joe Biden isn't going to be like, oh, and hey, by the way, you're trying to seriously damage investigative journalism by the precedent you had set for extraditing Julian Assange and charging him under the Espionage Act and an additional cybercrime charge, which is 100% how you do journalism. That's not Joey B. Joe Biden's the guy who is called Julian Assange a high-tech terrorist. And then about 12 hours later, Mitch McConnell called Julian Assange a high-tech terrorist because that was the talking point. And that talking point doesn't have a partisan political ideology. It has a sociopathic political ideology.
I think the only reason that they would even try to delay it at this point, I think it would obviously help Trump. I mean, if that's a sticky situation for him to have riding on him going into an election, either way it goes. But I think honestly that they're just trying to wear Julian down. I think that they're just trying to, and even after the hearings, even if there is a ruling, there's going to be appeals, and it's going to go on and on and on and on, and it's like a never-ending nightmare for Julian Assange. And I don't really, I people get mad at me because I'm cynical and a pessimist, but I just don't see like it being a great outcome for anybody really. I mean, if you just look at the history of the 10 years about that they have been actively pursuing this one man, multiple governments doing everything that they can to destroy him, it's not looking great. I mean, I don't say that to like dissuade people from standing up for him. I do it. Here I am. We should still fight, but it's bleak, and I think we need to be realistic about that.
Well, look at how they've tried to change the world since Julian was taken into prison. And it's because they feel like there's less chance of getting caught, I guess would be the way to word it. Because WikiLeaks still is functioning. Christians still prevented another false flag attack in Syria before it happened. But it's not the same level of technical and capable knowledge and experience that Julian brought to the situation, as our first teach-in talks about how he had been running media operations disclosing sensitive information since his childhood in Australia, with his first attempt at getting information out to the general public, essentially. So it's the things that have been allowed to happen at an alarmingly fast rate since Julian was taken into prison is just mind-boggling. With everything about the police violence to COVID-19 to literally not even having the ability to have a public discourse about what this virus is that's shutting down our economy and all of these other things, without just people just throwing random numbers and random facts, because we have no actual basis for truth in this situation.
Oh, I'm with you, Andrew. Andrew, why don't you tell people how they can support you guys? I know this trip is very, very quickly upcoming. How can people support you guys?
So we have a GoFundMe up. I'll drop the link into the chat. It's just actionforassange.com/donate 4. And we also just on our website over the weekend posted the schedule for DC, our full 3-week event list. It's going to be multiple trips to the British Embassy, the Ecuadorian Embassy. We're going to the State Department. We're going to the CIA. We're going to the Department of Justice. We're going as close to the White House as they'll allow us right now, which is Freedom Plaza and the National Mall. And a couple other places like media events, Google, Twitter, for example, are on that list of places that we're going to. So if you can, come to DC with us. We have 26 days, I believe is the number, until Julian's trial starts, which means we have about 22 days until we're going to actually be arriving in DC ourselves. So I just hope that everyone can make it out there with us, because it would be super exciting to see 10,000 people turn up into the streets with us.
And I just found real quick. I just found out yesterday. I just found this out. We're going to have a series of panel discussions throughout this. Confirmed for one of these panel discussions is the one and only Daniel Ellsberg.
Oh, that's awesome. That's excellent. That is very, very cool. Guys, I'm going to do my best to be out there. We'll see what happens. I'm trying to hit the road back again to go find a place to live and rent it. out in the Iowa area this weekend, but it may be a little later. So if I am on the road, Andrew, and I am cutting through Ohio, I'll definitely get at you guys. I appreciate everything you do. Keep it up, Action for Assange.
Thank you very much for joining us, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Love you guys.
Cool. So I just again want to say thanks for Jason for hopping in with us. It's always super exciting to have him on board. Again, I'm going to just shout out our call to action. This is the third and final week that we are asking people to reach out to their different city councils. I won't drone on too much about it because we've already hit about it once this vigil, but I'm going to go ahead and drop that link in there again. So if you could, please find your local city council people. If you're someone that's already contacted your local city council, please consider contacting the cities directly around you within your county. Yeah, so I'm going to go ahead and drop that action link in the chat again. And if anyone has any questions for us, we have about 20 minutes or so before Krish Mohan's hopping in and joining us here as well. So what did you want to pull up, Steve or Misty?
Let's see. Well, I mean, I don't know what you guys want to say for Krish.
I'm gonna go with the what is it, Anomaly 6? Anomaly 6, that article.
Oh, okay.
The Wall Street Journal is behind a paywall. And they're the news outlet that actually broke this story. So getting a hold of the internals on it has been a little bit harder because I'm not going to subscribe to the Wall Street Journal. Hopefully this will start turning up on archives soon or something like that. But let me pull up the article that I found that I did not have to pay for.
And before we dive in, let me just say the Wall Street Journal is the publication they use to get ahead of stories. So once we're through this, I'm really interested to see what actual information above and beyond this comes out.
So this is out of Android Central, which I had never heard of until finding this particular article. Damning new Wall Street Journal report says that a small U.S. government contractor embedded software in over 500 apps tracking millions of people worldwide. God damn it. I clicked on an ad and I did it again. I'm doing great. A small U.S. company with ties to the U.S. defense and intelligence communities has embedded software in its numerous mobile apps, allowing it to track the movements of hundreds of millions of mobile phones worldwide, according to interviews and documents reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. Anomaly 6, LLC, Jesus, my computer's skipping around, is the company in question, apparently boasting in marketing material that it was able to draw location data from more than 500 mobile applications from its own software development kit embedded directly into some apps. Anomaly 6 says it embeds its own SDK in some apps and in other cases gets location data from partners. The report says Anomaly 6 is a federal contractor that, what the fuck? God, that's irritating. Strobing out on me. I'm gonna have a complete epileptic seizure live on camera. That'll be fantastic. The report says Anomaly 6 is a federal contractor that provides global location data to branches of the U.S. government and private sector clients. It told Wall Street Journal that it restricts the sale of U.S. mobile phone movement data only to the private sector, however. Oh, that's really comforting. The report further claims numerous U.S. government agencies have deemed the scheme lawful. The report continues, the firm's capabilities were described in documents prepared for military officials that were reviewed by the journal. The company also explained its business practices in a recent briefing to the office of Senator Ron Wyden, whose staff then described it to the journal. The Oregon Democrat has been conducting a probe into the sale of Americans' location data. The data extracted from the apps is reportedly anonymized with alphanumeric identifiers, not linked to users' names. However, Over time, anonymous data can very easily be linked to an individual. If you take the same commute to work for your house each day, for example. The report notes, according to interviews with numerous people in the industry, there is little regulation in the US about the buying and selling of location data, leading to what one industry veteran called the Wild West. Consumers have come to expect free apps, and app makers have turned to selling user data to pay for the cost of developing and running the software. Oh, is that a link to the Wall Street Journal? Yeah. So I can't click on that because it'll just take me to a paywall. What the hell? Like, there's so many different, just mind-bogglingly frightening concepts in that article.
It's crazy, and it's right in our faces. They're not hiding it anymore. They're not pretending like they're not doing it. It's just a thing that everybody's kind of accepting. We're literally the frog in the pot, man. This has been like slow walked onto us over the past, 10, 15 years. And, people are just accepting it. And it's something that, I mean, we know that thanks to Ed Snowden, we know that they're spying on us. We know that everybody knows it, and nobody gives a shit. And it's crazy to me that that's not a thing that has, mass attention. And I get that, it's because people genuinely don't understand what's going on, and our mainstream media is failing on an epic level to inform people by design. But it's still nuts to me that, so much of what they're doing and how they're surveilling us is getting out there, and still people just don't seem to care.
Yeah, it's just baked in. There's now Julian Assange said it, that we were the last free generation.
The last free week on Earth, if you look at it like relative to when the lockdown started and when the world started going crazy, was literally the first week of Julian's trial. That first week of extradition hearings, rendition hearings, was the last week that people had the ability to move freely from place to place. It was the last week where people had the ability to go and get the thing they needed for their household.
Yeah, we were worried that they weren't going to let Taylor out of London.
Mm-hmm.
She was just going to have to stay there and quarantine there.
And everyone's just okay with it. Like, everyone's cool with saying, well, I have nothing to hide, so what's the big deal? When that almost becomes like a boasting point for people, where they're like, I'm not doing nothing wrong. Like, what the fuck do I care? Well, it comes down to the fact that you either challenge power or you get dominated. There's no middle ground. There's no, hey, let's only walk this national prison slave track trace database state halfway, and then we're going to stop, because then people might think it's literally minor incremental changes that people don't notice or make a minor inconvenience in their life that add up over time to the point that you can't go on an airplane without having your crotch grabbed and photographed naked.
Well, what the people don't understand who say that, I don't have anything to hide, so why do I care? It's not about what you have to hide. It's about what they have to hide. And they are able to watch your every move, every phone call you make, every email you send, every text message you send, your Twitter account, your Facebook account. They have access to all of it. But then when one of us tries to expose them, the full wrath of the global elite comes down on that person. And that's really what it's about. It's not about what you have to hide. It's about the fact that they're taking away your right to privacy while also taking away your right to challenge power. And it's a double-edged sword, and people are just taking it. And it's getting to the point now where we're almost point of no return. Like, it's really dire. And it's depressing to me that this is not something that people are not more up in arms about. It's terrifying to me. And again, I know that it's just that people don't really have an understanding of what's happening. It's just really frustrating when you do know and you can't find the words to make people understand the significance of what's happening.
Well, I actually had a really deep conversation with some people that are relatively close to me. And the thing I figured out is it's not asking them, like, hey, do you care that this happened? Like, do you give a shit about this one event? It's just asking people, what's your line in the sand? Like, what is the thing that you are willing to give yourself a sense of obligation about because it's that important? And I think that that's really the starting point. It's not asking people like, hey, are you going to help fight to get our privacy back? It's just asking someone like, what's the last thing you're willing to give up before you say enough is enough?
Well, and that was my whole problem. And I think you, Andrew, were the one who like coined the phrase, but that was my whole problem with Bernie Sanders's campaign, because it was, what are you willing to trade for Medicare for all? What are you willing to trade for a Green New Deal? Are you willing to sacrifice investigative journalism in the life of Julian Assange? If so, put a rose emoji next to your Twitter handle. You know, are you like, do you not give a fuck about civil liberties? Could you care less about US imperialism? Great. Have we got a candidate for you? You know, gonna say everything that you want to hear about this domestic policy shit without ever once addressing the national security state, the surveillance state, the way that journalists have been treated and continue to be treated. Not only that, but one tweet that never mentioned Julian Assange by name was the sum total of candidate Bernie Sanders, like his whole stance on what Julian Assange was, and to go from that to Biden, who has called him a high-tech terrorist when he could speak and use multisyllabic words without having to like blink it off. And Kamala Harris, who is as law and order, if not more law and order than most of the people in the Trump administration. Like, this
Well,
is
she's
why,
also a direct product of Hillary Clinton. Let's be real.
without a doubt.
Yeah, this is her, kind of protege. So I think that it couldn't be more clear where Kamala Harris is going to stand on Julian Assange. And I mean, Bernie Sanders, in his little statement that you mentioned, that he didn't even mention Julian Assange by name, that took 44 days for that douchewad to even put out that. And from a guy who claims to care about all of the stuff that he cares about, it's all bullshit, really. Let's just call it what it is. He claims to care about a lot of things and is really good at putting on a show, but when it comes down to it, he doesn't actually stand for any of those things. But he really does put on a good show. I'll give him that.
He's better at professional wrestling than Donald Trump.
Absolutely. More convincing for sure.
4 years ago, maybe, but it felt like he was phoning in the entire campaign this time around.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that had a lot to do with his advisors that he chose to surround himself with. Partially. I mean, I just don't think he gave a shit at all. He knew, I don't think he even cared to put up a pretense or, pretend like he was, making an effort. I mean, a lot of his followers fell for it and believed that he was, but to us who, we're kind of on the outside looking in, it couldn't have been more obvious that that dude had no intention of fighting or winning or fighting back. Or, I mean, come on. We all saw the coin tosses in Iowa where the dude's literally like flipping it over in his hands and then like placing it the way that he wants it on top of his hand. Bernie Sanders didn't say jack shit about that. He said nothing. And so, I mean, I couldn't understand why anybody would have supported him after 2016, after watching what he did to his supporters. But surely by now, y'all have to realize.
and yet,
no, I know.
On my way back home from work, and this is like everyone in Bernie's sphere, the same like religious fervor gets passed down to the supporters. On my way home, I checked in with our friend Kit Cabello at Hardlands Media, and he was ranting about the Kamala Harris thing. And one of the other HLM guys was like, well, Joe Biden could have picked Nina Turner and then he would have been, and like, it was the hardest thing for me not to just slam my head into the freaking
it's really one of the most frustrating things to deal with currently in my life. And I tweeted out a while ago that I honestly believe that the Bernie supporters are going to be even more difficult to disabuse of their disillusions of Bernie Sanders than the Obama people will be. It's going to be tough to get those people to recognize reality. And I get it. He really did sell it well. And he, and people really are desperate. They want somebody to believe in so much. They really want to believe somebody's in their corner and fighting for them. And that's partially why at the same time I get unbelievably annoyed with these people. I also just feel really bad for them because I get it. Like, we're all in that same boat. We want to believe that somebody's got our back. Bernie Sanders ain't it. He never was. And
real quickly, I would like to deliver an open telegram to the people who insist on making heroes out of politicians and propagandists. Stop.
I was gonna say, you see that same level of like hero worship for Bernie that you do for Trump in the QAnon movement, where you literally have people on the internet putting up an article that's like, Fox News is requesting Julian's testimony, Donald Trump, MAGA, hashtag, fuck yeah. And at the same time, reject the reality that it was Trump's Department of Justice that brought this, and reject the reality that it is Trump himself and Barr himself that could end the prosecution of Julian Assange. But instead, they look at an article that, albeit is relatively good news, but take it out of context of reality and say, look, Trump's the good guy, he's winning, look at Julian's going to get to testify, everyone's going to know about Seth Rich. But they don't mention the fact that Julian spent over a year in solitary confinement, 23 and a half hours a day by himself, didn't appear in his own court hearings 4 times in a row because he was reported as unwell.
In the middle of a global pandemic where, he should be 100% applicable for a compassionate release. And, I'm glad you brought up the QAnon people because his mom, Christine Assange, actually tweeted out, I think it might have been today, might have been yesterday, that she just blocks those people. Those people are genuinely hurting Julian Assange, and they think they're helping, and they're not. You are harming the cause. You are putting his life in danger. You're spreading misinformation, and it's unbelievably irresponsible and dangerous. If you actually give a shit about Julian Assange, stop pushing that nonsense. It's not true. Like, it's just not. And but you're right, though. It is kind of that same cult of personality where whatever is said, if you criticize their leader, they hate you and they believe everything good that they hear.
Another thing that the Q people never fucking put together, never, because one of their original I guess causes was JFK Jr. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of pictures of JFK Jr. standing with his arm around Ghislaine Maxwell. And they've never put that together because it doesn't mesh with the fantasy. And like, look, man, I don't kink shame, dude. It's perfectly healthy to have fantasies, but don't let your fantasies kill innocent people. Don't let your fantasies warp your perception of reality that you think a magic man is talking to you from a fucking computer.
Yeah, and leave your fantasies for fantastical things. This is real life. Like, this is a real life issue. And just believing crap that you're fed because and there is no basis for it either. That's what's so perplexing to me is, has Q ever been proven right to be right about anything? Has that ever happened that wasn't already out in the public sphere? Like, there's never been some crazy prediction that's been proven to be true, or it's all just been like run of the mill 4chan bullshit. Like, that's all it is.
I actually think QAnon is a military intelligence operation, but I think that's exactly what it is, an intelligence operation specifically designed to harness the desperation and intellectual understanding that our world is dominated by human sex traffickers to divert that attention and energy away from the most powerful free portion of the internet, which is the chans and the boards and the dark parts of the internet. So it takes those people's fervor for freedom and it turns it into fighting to support the global dictatorship. Because at the end of the day, Donald Trump is no different than Barack Obama. Like, the only thing that we don't know is what countries he's invaded, most likely because it's classified and done through intelligence operations.
Sorry, dead air.
No, you're good.
Reading there's someone in my chat, Thomas Buse, thinks that Q is the Marine Corps and that they started an intelligence unit in 2015. I've always leaned heavily towards NSA personally, but like, dude, it's so fucking cartoonish. The entire Q thing is just, there's like movie plot lines and fucking like bad movie plot lines. Bad action movies from the 80s are now, 100% certifiable, like hardcore reality. It deactivated a ton of people. It put a ton of people to sleep. And that's really where there's no difference between Q and Barack Obama. It just let them think that because there was this one entity that everything was going to be okay. And they didn't have to get mad about anything. And they didn't have to go do anything. And they didn't have to get out into the streets anymore. They didn't have to demand any accountability from anyone in office because they had a plan they could trust. And that's the most dangerously stupid thing about it.
Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to, too. Like I was just saying earlier, the people just really want something to believe in, and they want to believe like somebody's on their side. And so this Q thing allows these people to believe that Donald Trump is this crazy, wicked, smart chess master of a, oligarchy tearing down badass. And he's not, y'all. Like, I don't know. I don't know how to talk to people who are not willing, but who are able to be led into believing that Donald Trump is for anybody but himself. It's not like we don't have empirical evidence throughout his entire lifespan that he is an epic level douche canoe narcissist, shit stain of a human being.
I have friends that are blue collar workers, fucking tree guys and shit. These guys are literally like hauling and dragging brush all day on a steep slope in the middle of the redwood forest. And they're fans of Donald Trump and believe in Q. And it's like, do you have a guy in Trump who won't pay his fucking workers?
Yeah.
If you were going to do a fucking tree job at Mar-a-Lago, you would get stiffed. And you like this guy. Why? Because the magic man in the chat room tells you? Well, are you fucking high? And if you are, share. Don't hog that shit.
That's some good shit, if that's what's up.
The other thing that I think, and we've talked about this off camera a little bit, and we'll pull you in just a second, Krish. I just want to make this point before I say hello. I think there's a part of me that thinks that QAnon is just Barron Trump. And if people remember, this goes all the way back to 2016, 2017, when the media started like saying that he was autistic and like talking shit about him. And Trump literally just said, Barron's good with computers. And then he completely disappeared from the media. 3 months later, QAnon started. 3 years later, it's still going. And to me, if it's not a military intelligence operation, it is a desperate child now in his teenage years trying to justify the militaristic war pig actions of his father.
So please welcome to the show,
Krish!
stand-up comedian, writer extraordinaire, host of Forkful of Ramen, our friend Krish Mohan. How are you, my friend?
How's it going, guys? Sorry I'm a bit late. Can you guys hear me?
Are you? I thought you were right on time.
Oh,
Yeah, you're a little soft.
Then forget I said anything.
You were 2 minutes early. 2 minutes early. You're
That's
good.
a wrap, everybody.
See, wait. Andrew, are you saying that Barron Trump is QAnon?
I'm saying that it's as likely based on the evidence as it is that it's a military intelligence operation, because most of the like Q proofs center around direct communication with Donald Trump. So the people that would have that are either military intelligence or his son.
You don't think it's
Why would his
kind
kid
of-
be all up on his presidential BlackBerry?
I'm
Why?
just saying, it's just a theory. He's
Like,
good with
you know that
computers.
dude doesn't live there, right?
Oh yeah.
Like
probably lives in some
he's
private
really a
school.
time traveler, like that book said. Do you remember that? Do you remember that theory that ran around for a while? There was a book that was printed in like the 1800s called The Adventures of Little Baron von Trump. And it was a little blonde kid that looked just like Baron Trump.
Yeah.
And then that dovetailed into the theory that Trump's uncle stole Tesla's research notes and then turned around and made a time machine, which is how Baron von Trump had his adventures. I am not stoned enough to have this conversation. I just want to make that
For
perfect.
real though, that's a really creative conspiracy theory. I
So
mean, well,
another
Yeah,
super
that one.
interesting thing to pile on to this wonderful conspiracy video this is turning into. There's a conspiracy theory built into the Project Pegasus conspiracy theory that a dude named Andrew something or another, like Weissel or some shit like that, like someone you've literally never heard of, was going to lead the world in the 2016 election into the global truth movement. So I think that that's a really interesting thing too, because he's literally like, I'm a time traveler that came into the future to lead the truth movement and liberate humanity. Like,
Oh man,
it's rowdy. But
I
so
do like the creativity of conspiracy theories, though. I gotta say, I always enjoy like how wild and creative they can be. I remember when I was early in my touring career, I got to open for Big J Okerson, who's a very funny comedian, a really great storyteller, very dirty comic, but very funny. And he's a super sweet guy. And we were staying in the condo, and one of his things is to like get high and watch a bunch of conspiracy theory movies. And so that's what we did after the Late Show. And one of the ones that we watched were like, it was like about the Aurora shooters, the theater.
Columbine
No,
or the
no,
movie theater guy?
the guy
movie
that dressed
theater.
up like the Joker.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah,
Krishy.
that guy. And I remember he got so upset about like just how not creative the conspiracy theory was, because they were like going into this whole thing about like just looking at FBI body movements and stuff like that. And he was just like, it's not even that creative, and what the fuck are you supposed to do after? Like, are you saving these people, or like, and all this other shit. But it was just like some of their theories about him were kind of interesting, but then a lot of it was like, look at the FBI guy, look at the way he moves his shoulder, and it's just like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, that was their linchpin, is just like a shoulder twitch that this FBI guy had. It's just like, I don't know. I find them entertaining, and what people will like latch onto in order to prove that their conspiracies are actually true. But a lot of them are like, they're very creative, but they're also very like, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if I can go off of that.
Well, the intelligence communities have done a great job of coining the term conspiracy theory in and of itself, and then building from there as a way to essentially smear anyone that tries to say anything counter to the mainstream narrative. Even if that narrative in and of itself is a conspiracy theory.
Fucking
Like,
giant conspiracy theory,
Right,
like
like-
Russia hacked our freedom.
yeah.
Yeah.
Russia.
So,
They're
Krish,
still doing
something.
Good.
You have something awesome going on Friday, so I want to give you a minute to talk about what you do as well as what's going on this weekend.
Yeah. So since the whole pandemic started, I, as well as pretty much every entertainer in the country, couldn't tour or perform live events. So in order to kind of figure out how to still perform live, I decided to do some Zoom shows, and I did a test back in April. It went well. So pretty much every Friday since May, I've been doing these shows that I've been calling the Citizen Revolution virtual stand-up comedy show. And starting in June, each week I talk about a particular sociopolitical topic. So I've talked about the Black Panther Party, the history of the Black Panther Party. I've talked about electoral politics, how many general strikes we've seen in the history of the United States, the Fed. It covers a whole range of topics. And each week I also donate to a grassroots organization. I donate half the ticket sales to a grassroots organization. And this Friday, on August 14th, I'm going to be donating to Action for Assange because you guys are going down to DC and to help support that and help you guys get down there and cover something that I doubt a network like CNN or MSNBC or even The Guardian is going to give fair coverage to. I want to make sure like the people that are going to cover it in a fair way are going to give the information that corporate media isn't going to give to that you guys hit your goal, and I wanted to help contribute in some way. Plus, Steve's popped into a couple shows. I know Andrew's popped into one or two shows as well. So, it's always fun to have you guys. Sometimes it gets a little rowdy, depending on the topic in mind. But that's part of the experience. But they're always super fun. The show's at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, and the tickets are available on my website, which is krishmohanhaha.com. It's KRISHMOHANHAHA.com.
I've had a lot of fun on the shows that I've been able to pop in for too, man. And like, I really I've seen you do stand up, and we've had you on the show, and you've been on my show,
Yes.
But like, it really I didn't know how good of a writer you were.
Oh, thank you.
And it's your skill in that particular area of art is fucking incredible, man. Like, I wanted to be able to give you a shout out for that. But I can tell, like, when you're going into a prepared piece, because everybody's voice changes just a little bit when they read the shit that they wrote. And so that tips me off that this is a pre-written thing. And man, the way that you construct all of it is very impressive to me.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah.
I was just going to say the information you cover too is pretty pertinent. Like, you are one of the only people in the last 2 years that I've heard actually talk in depth about the functions of the Federal Reserve and do it in a way that's actually relatively entertaining and funny, more so than here is how banking works.
Which I feel like when you talk about the Federal Reserve, though, you are in essence talking about how banking works. But when you talk about the way that the Federal Reserve came to be, is like, it's so weird and creepy, and there's so much. It's bizarre to me how much. For lack of a better term, how much stock we put into the Federal Reserve. But pardon that pun there, but it is interesting. That's the sort of stuff that's interesting to me. Like, I'm not the type of person, like, I've had conversations with friends about money market accounts and mutual funds and all that stuff. Is like, that's the boring shit. But what's more interesting is the history behind how we got here. It's the history behind why we put so much weight into a centralized bank, especially in a country that was essentially built against a centralized bank. Like the notion that the founding fathers were against a centralized bank, but then we did it anyway because...
Except Hamilton.
Who is it?
Hamilton.
Yeah, well, he doesn't really count for shit. That guy.
Well, he ran the Federalist faction. It was his, like, him and his little cabal of like pre-Wall Street cronies that really went above and beyond to try and establish a central bank, like way back 1780s. There's God, am I gonna forget the name of the file? Oh, there's a wonderful piece of historical fiction book novel called The Whiskey Rebellion. And it goes into fascinating, like real accurate detail about the creation of the US stock exchange and how traders and speculators have been basically ruining it for everybody since the beginning of the country. I recommend reading it.
I think the Whiskey Rebellion too might have been a major part of Pittsburgh, which is where I'm from. So I remember like
It
studying
was.
that stuff. Yeah. We used to take a field trip because there's like a church near my middle school. Yeah. Oh man, this is like years ago. That I remember we would go there and there would be like a reenactment of stuff, and it was like this big deal that we had to study. But you know, when you kind of think about the stock exchange and all that, it is literally like a system that makes absolutely no sense. And like once you start pointing that stuff out, it's really hard for people to justify it. You know what I mean? Like really the only justifications I get when I start saying like this doesn't make any sense, listen to what you're saying, well they go, well that's just how it is. You know, and it's like, but it doesn't have to be. Which is sort of the point that I try to make in these shows is there's a status quo and the way that we do things, but we don't have to continue doing it this way. It's very antithetical to basically the way that we should live our lives, basically the way that, you know, like the Constitution talks about the pursuit of happiness, and it doesn't come from Wall Street or the Fed or the banking industry. Like that's not where the pursuit of happiness comes from. Psychologically too, is we find more happiness in philanthropy and helping each other out, and just doing good for your fellow man. That's a major way that we get happiness. And you know, like none of the systems we have in place within this unfettered capitalistic culture that we live in promotes any of that.
And it really is kind of nuts too. Like I was just talking to a friend of mine the other day. It's the year 2020 and there are still grown ass adults who think that an appropriate way to deal with our issues is to blow shit up and kill innocent people. And that's crazy. That's like you would think. And if you kind of question the status quo, you're seen as this kook. And it's like, you guys, shouldn't that be the goal? Like, shouldn't we be working towards a society where we take care of each other and we look out for each other? And
That's communism.
Well, then I'm a fucking commie. I mean, I am Putin's buddy, so let's be real. He's it kind of drives me nuts though that it's when you're when you recognize the fact that all of that stuff, all of the war and genocide and starvation, it's unnecessary. As a human race, we have evolved to a place where we absolutely could take care of everybody. We could do that if we wanted to, and it's a conscious choice that's made that keeps us from doing it, and it's maddening when you think about it. So yeah, I mean, kudos to you for being able to find the humor in it, because I just get really pissed off.
Oh yeah, the humor definitely comes from the rage. The thing that I'm kind of working on for this Friday show is, since we're talking about Assange and everything that's going on with him, is to kind of look at what the Espionage Act is and how it's affected whistleblowers and just our general life and as it is. And a lot of people, even when I was researching it, I had an inkling, but it's always nice to get the proof, isn't it? Like whenever you're like, oh, I think it's this awful thing, and then you research it and you go, oh, it is this awful thing. Like I had a feeling that the Espionage Act was never really about espionage in any way. It was never really about, someone coming in trying to steal state secrets or anything. And it wasn't. Even when it was written, the people that they were going after were, socialists, part of the labor movement, like Eugene Debs. They were going after anti-war activists and peace, people promoting peace. And they basically used something like the Espionage Act to say that if you were talking about peace, if you were promoting peace, if you were an anti-war activist talking about how the working class is constantly used as cannon fodder, they'll put you in prison. And
people actually don't realize that for the last 102 years, right, since 1918 and Eugene Debs' prosecution, that it is illegal to dissuade people from joining the military. And that's something that people honestly have no idea about, that you can literally, in the privacy of your home, tell your child, friend, brother, hey, I really don't think you should join the army. And
well,
you
they don't
can,
see it as
and you
patriotic.
should, according to our laws, be convicted and put in federal prison for up to a life sentence.
Yeah, it started as 20 years. That's well, with Debs, I think they gave him 30, and the only reason he got out is because they repealed the Sedition Act, because they were like, oh, this one's too crazy, but let's keep the other one. Let's keep version 1, and that's what you see be used against whistleblowers, right? That's what you saw being used against Ellsberg and Chelsea Manning, Edward Snowden, and now they're doing it to Assange. And it's basically like they have failed so many times in trying to get whistleblowers to stop blowing the whistle, to be quiet. And now I think they have a prime opportunity with Assange. And I think the reason why, this case shouldn't be happening, period. What we found out about UC Global and how they spied on him, and he basically didn't have any sort of privacy at all within the Ecuadorian embassy. And the fact that UC Global was partnered with the CIA and sold information to them, like all of that, the court should look at that and be like, oh, this is a mistrial. If he didn't have any sort of client privilege or client attorney privacy at all, there's a mistrial. But they didn't, and now they're trying, they're going through all of the motions to get him here so that they can try him under the Espionage Act, validate it, and try to make it even stronger. And this is sort of like, it seems very much like this is their last-ditch effort, and it's very, very unfortunate that it's someone like Julian Assange that they have to make an example out of, which is why it's important to have people like you guys and Taylor and Lee Camp and Jimmy Dore and myself and pretty much comedians and independent journalists, it seems like, that speak out against this thing. Because if you look at something like CNN, last year they had they put out this huge article that was debunked by someone that was in the Ecuadorian embassy that basically is CIA talking points through and through. It's one step after another. So how can you trust something like CNN when they're so open and willing to just spew this intelligence industrial complex narrative?
There are politicians who will decry state television in the countries that we don't like. And
well, the answer to your question, Krish, is that you don't trust them.
Exactly.
That's the answer. You don't. There is anybody who trusts CNN at this point is it's again one of those situations where I don't know whether to be really mad at them or to feel sorry for them, because it's, a lot of them are people who are, my mom's age or older or whatever, that they've always trusted the news. The news has always been, a reliable source of information, and those, so I can't be mad at those people necessarily because they don't know any better, but it's also incredibly frustrating to deal with those people.
It is. Yeah. I was talking to my girlfriend about this the other day. I get burned out on those arguments, and they always happen on social media. When you can sit down, even if it's like this, we're in different cities across the country, but we're able to have a discussion. I can see you guys' faces and everything, but when I sit down face to face with somebody, it's a lot easier to have the conversation. Over social media, I get exhausted. Trying to, point out hey, this is here's the CIA talking point. Here's how they're trying to smear him. This is not factual. I had a conversation with somebody that was looking for new news outlets, right? Like he's like, oh, I listen to NPR, but I'm looking to diversify. I listen to Democracy Now, and I was like, those are fine, but NPR is funded by Boeing. They get a lot of state funding,
And the Koch brothers and
yeah,
Eric
the
Schmidt.
Koch brothers. Yeah, there's a lot of right wing billionaires that put money into NPR. They're Democracy Now. And I used to like Democracy Now a lot, and all of a sudden they went down this Orange Man bad Russiagate conspiracy thing. And Aaron Mate even pointed out is like, I don't know why. I don't understand why they took this direction. But I pointed out Aaron is one of the trusted sources that I like listening to. I think Aaron does. Aaron is one of the true journalists that's out there. And I pointed out that he writes for The Gray Zone. And immediately, I had people coming out saying that he was, Max Blumenthal was a Kremlin puppet, that he was a Maduro puppet. And I didn't know how to so I just tried to talk to them and be like, what makes you, because he points out certain facts, and it was like, well, he's been on RT. And I was like, well, then you shouldn't trust anybody that's been on BBC because they're on UK state media, or anything, or like CBC because that's Canadian state media, or NPR because that's American state media. And none of these massive states have the people in mind. They've historically never given a shit about the people. But that wasn't, but that argument veered off into, I've started noticing there is this weird nationalism on the liberal side of things, and it comes down to that McCarthyist argument of, if I disagree with you, then you must be promoting this, anti-US, anti-patriotism kind of narrative that you're XYZ puppet. I can't say that the CIA has literally come out and said movements like Black Lives Matter are possibly connected to Russia because they sow discord within the American culture. And I was talking to somebody about it, and they were like, well, they do. And I was like, no, that's not what the Black Lives Matter movement is about. The Black Lives Matter movement isn't about sowing discord in America. It's pointing out how bad racial tension in America is, and how much inequality there is in terms of race in this country.
Well, I think people are very incapable of recognizing the nuance in this situation, because is it possible that Russia or Russian agents or Chinese agents or Israeli agents are trying to infiltrate movements in this country to co-opt them and to, of course that's possible. Of course, every government in the world is ruled by crazy sociopathic narcissists who want control, and they're going to try to get it in whatever way that they can. And if that means they got to send people to infiltrate some groups and cause some chaos, they'll do that, sure. But Black Lives Matter that's not what it's about. That's not what it was started from. It's not the purpose behind it. The intention behind it has nothing to do with Russia. Russia did not cause racism in this country. Russia does not cause police brutality in this country. Russia doesn't cause, police murders in this country. It's a ridiculous notion. And so, yeah, there's some nuance there, that sure, there could probably be. It's no different than how we infiltrate other governments and interfere with their elections and all of those things. They're all crazy people. We're ruled by crazy people. So yes, that stuff happens.
Yeah,
and I think it's actually more of the U.S. intelligence community infiltrating that group and causing a larger, more violent response than otherwise would be precipitated. Because the individual people there at the protests, whether that's the ones that are still going on or the ones when it first sparked off, they weren't there because they were George Floyd's friend. They were there because that same level of brutality had touched their lives. Yes. And if anything, I think the argument should be spun to a bit of a different standing, where you could say that it's not Russia that's trying to distort this underlying racial tension, that it's the United States attempting to divide, conquer, and control the mechanisms and outlets upon which dissidents are allowed to exert themselves in a collective fashion. Because everything is on the table as far as the way that they infiltrate groups. Like, if you're newer to the activism community, look back at how they infiltrated the Occupy movement. Most specifically, here in the city that I'm in, Cleveland, the FBI essentially gave someone a pretend bomb and said, tie this to a bridge, and then found that person guilty because the FBI gave them a pretend bomb, the idea, and spent 2 years egging them towards this violence. So
Right.
in intelligence community infiltration of any activist movement is above and beyond, and it's used as a way to divide and conquer, because they have one group that says, well, you're in this for this, and you have another group that says, well, we're trying to do this, and then it creates this left-right paradigm instead of the people that stormed the Michigan State House recognizing that the violence that will be brought upon them will be the same level of violence that is currently experienced by the minority communities in the ghettos.
Yeah, and to kind of pick up off of both your points there too is, yeah, no one wants to, when they start talking about how there is Russian meddling or Chinese meddling or any of that sort of stuff. One, as Missy pointed out, this is what the intelligence communities do. They do that all the time. That's kind of the role of intelligence communities, which begs the question of, like, why? Like, if it's about protecting us from foreign enemies, why are they infiltrating? Why is American intelligence infiltrating American civil rights groups? Right? Like, that's another aspect of it they don't really want to talk about. Is like, you don't even have to go into the coups of the CIA, which there are tons of, between anything in Latin America to Iran. You can see throughout history that the CIA has run coups all over the world. But not only that, but once you learn about things like COINTELPRO and what happened with the Occupy movement, it becomes very, very difficult, in my opinion, to justify the actions of any intelligence community, period. So when one intelligence community like the CIA is saying, well, Black Lives Matter is connected to Russian intelligence, and Russian intelligence is saying, all right, and they're not saying anything, well, there's nefarious misdeeds going on between both of them. It's that intelligence war that keeps going on back and forth, and it becomes convoluted and it becomes ridiculous, and it all becomes theatrics. But at the end of the day, who are the victims of these theatrics? It's us. It's the people, and the way they kind of trick you into validating and justifying and supporting these theatrics is by saying that it's about your safety, right? Oh, we have to stop Russia because they're meddling in our elections. Maybe there's no proof of it. I mean, you did a whole fucking investigation and you found nothing, and they're still kind of shoving that narrative down, and they're still shoving that narrative for Assange. That's one of the narratives they use, is that he was a Russian agent, and it's based on what? And there's this xenophobia that starts with that, because then, like, Russian citizens went to see him, like an anti-Putin group went to see him, and they were like, oh, Kremlin ties. They start using the word Kremlin ties because of all this, and it's not factual, because you have to realize that if there is somebody like Putin who is this authoritarian, there are going to be groups that push back. That's always happened, no matter where you are. So how can the group that pushes back, that goes to visit Assange, have Kremlin ties? It doesn't make any sense. But that's not what people like to hear, because what's more fun and what's more sexy is the notion of spies, right? Like, we all want to live in that movie. We all want to live in a James Bond fantasy. And
the truth is, it doesn't have to make sense. It really doesn't.
Yeah.
All they have to do is just repeat it over and over and over again, and it becomes truth. That's how it always works. It never has to be based on reality or facts. They just make shit up and just repeat it as often as possible and as loud as possible. And before you know it, that's, the common perception. That's what people believe. And they're very, very good at it. the propaganda game in this country, especially, and I think Steve has said this before, that, you know, the United States is the most propagandized country on the planet. And that is so true. I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to a North Korea. The people in this country have no idea what's going on around them for the most
As
part.
as a rule, Americans don't know their own history.
Yes.
Yep.
We
And
just
the history that we're taught,
Yeah.
history that we're taught, if we're fortunate enough, or if our parents were fortunate enough, when we get to college, we find out that like the vast majority of the history that we were taught was 100% bullshit and lies, but they keep that behind a paywall.
Well, I just had this conversation. The show that I do with Jesse Zerowell, Facts on the Ground, we just today interviewed the executive director of Sovereign Bodies Institute. And part of the whole conversation that we're trying to do a series on missing and murdered Indigenous women. And the whole part of the series, like the whole point that we're trying to convey, is that this is not what's happening with MMIW is not happening in a vacuum. This is something that's been a pervasive issue across history. Like, this is about the adoption program and the boarding schools and all that stuff. It's all connected. But we were just talking today about how, you know, in school, we're taught that, you know, the white folks, came to this country and we saved the indigenous population. We civilized them. And it's really quite the opposite. I mean, if you look at the history, rape, domestic violence, violence in general in indigenous communities was incredibly rare before white people showed up. And then we, you know, kind of forced upon them our culture of patriarchy and, conquest. And that's, you know, we've kind of, instead of saving them as we were taught as civilizing the savages, it's quite the opposite. And the people in this country have no idea about their legitimate history and where they come from. And it's kind of terrifying, because if you really want to move forward as a society, you need to know where you came from in a real way.
Yeah.
Well, it's Orwell. He who controls the past controls the present, and he who controls the present controls the future.
Yep.
Yep.
And our past has been, by and large, at least until the advent of the interwebs, locked behind ivory towers, locked inside of ivory towers. So I interrupted you, Krish.
No. That's exactly kind of the point that I was going to make. Is that's why the education system is so controlled. I remember a couple of years ago, I was reading some about Texas. I think because Texas is they buy up a lot of the textbooks, so they get to control what goes into the textbooks. And one of the things that the Texas school board wanted to do was change the word slaves to workers, right? Which is like, that's not how much can you lie and get away with it, right? Is like, that's not remotely anywhere close. Like, you can't call them workers. You're not paying them. You're torturing them. That's not a worker. And
Well, so in the era of coronavirus, that is a worker, because that's where we're moving to. Is the only people that will have jobs will be the people that work for the government jobs, and if you don't,
oh, sure.
Yeah. So they're trying to redefine what slavery is to mean the worker, because what ultimately they're after is so much automation and tracking and tracing that if you step out of that line, you just get eaten alive by society in and of itself, but also the system.
That way, if they redefine what that means, you know, when we use terms like wage slavery because somebody doesn't get paid enough to do their job, well, the word slavery doesn't mean anything anymore. It's lost its edge. It's lost its historical meaning. And now they can basically say, well, you know what, $7.25 is too high. We're actually going to dip it down to $6.50, and that's going to be minimum wage. And no one's going to bat an eye about it because we've changed what slavery means. Slaves were still workers. They were still working. They were still part of the working class, which I'm not saying that they weren't. I think they were part of you know, the people, and which is why we had the war to begin with, is to say these are people and we should treat them like people instead of property. But changing that word completely redefines that history. And then going forward, they can make all these rules, and there's a whole generation of people that don't understand what's the historical impact of slavery. But that's the thing is you know, if there weren't people pushing back on it, that would have gone through. You know, I remember when I was doing a piece on this a couple of years ago. It's like they were also trying to depict Mexicans as drunk and lazy in the textbooks. So again, it's like you can put an anti-immigration rhetoric out there. And you know, when you hear a politician say that, oh well, all the Mexican you know, they come through and they're all drunk and lazy. Well, now you have a whole generation of kids that have seen a textbook that has essentially described them that way, and then seen an image where they're also depicted, you know, with red noses and they're sleepy and they're not really working or anything, when that's the furthest thing from the truth. So kind of controlling the education system is a big deal. And now we're having this argument about sending kids back to school and not really giving a shit about like what that's going to do to teachers and what that's going to do to families and communities. And the only people that are pushing back are the teachers' unions. The teachers' unions are the ones that have come up with a list of demands. They have come up with a way to sit there and say, well, this is how you create a safe environment. And these are all the precautions we have to take as a country to make sure that kids can go to school and everybody can be safe. And the CDC hasn't even come up with a plan. And the fucking unions have done it. And what do we do in this country is we shit on the unions.
Well, so the plan here in the city that I live in, where I had to choose to not send my girls to school, they are doing a reduced class size, 2 days a week. And if anyone in your class gets flagged by your county contact tracers, which is in and of itself is a whole different fucked up thing we talk about, but you have to go home. Your whole class and your teacher go home for 14 days. And then on top of that, the lunchroom, right? The like school table, 4 benches, fold up. I hope everyone can picture them. Instead of having 3 to 4 kids per bench, which is a total of like 24-ish kids per table, it's going to be 4. 1 person per bench set out in a staggered manner. So you essentially put one classroom divided amongst an entire gymnasium and mandate that the kids sit there, otherwise they're punished for interacting with their friends at a time where historically they have been allowed to. So even the way that schools are going back to business as usual is just the most psychologically damaging thing to a child, because you're literally training them. You sit here, you shut up, you eat your food, and then you go do your learning with your mask on.
Yeah, I never. When I was in India, there was we had classes with 70 kids, you know, so I never got any sort of like individualized attention. I kind of had to, you learn the lessons, but then like if you have any further questions, like your parents are supposed to help you, right? Like that, or you get a tutor or something along those lines. So it wasn't this individualized attention type of stuff. But when I came here and I did get that sort of individualized attention, like it was the pace of education here was way slower. So now with the whole coronavirus thing is like we're slowing the pace of an already slow education system down way more, when in reality you really don't have to. Like you can use various technologies and various apps. The school has enough money to probably pay for it. The school has enough money to pay the teachers what they deserve to do virtual teaching. And that also doesn't mean that the kids have to be isolated, right? I do think that there is a way that you can socialize kids. Homeschoolers do it. I remember meeting somebody that homeschools their kids, and they said, well, the parents in the neighborhood that all homeschool each other will meet once or twice a week, and they'll, you know, kind of do like a group lesson and let their kids hang out, so the kids get to socialize with other kids their age.
We
So-
had 3 different homeschool co-op programs going on here, right where I live, not even inside city of Santa Cruz, but like out up here in the mountains, like 3 separate homeschool co-ops. And 1 day a week they would go after lunch and spend the rest of the day at the elementary school, you know, whichever elementary school it was, and their performances that they all worked on, and you know, where they play musical, whatever, sing along. They also came to the elementary school to do that. And like there was not, it wasn't like they were isolated. They are far more isolated now with this distance learning bullshit than they ever would be in any kind of a classroom setting. But Santa Cruz County went so deep into everything Dr. Fauci says is law, and fucking like they're the type of people who would call you a murderer if you were not near anyone, just outdoors and did not have a mask on, and then drive away in their Prius with the coexist bumper sticker.
Well, to steal the conversation a little bit, kind of on the topic of online learning, there's a Wise Up Action article that just came out about a new documentary, or not just came out, but about a new documentary that's coming out about Julian Assange and his father, more specifically, and his struggle that he's had with this. So do we want to, can you pull that up on the screen share for us, Steve?
The which one? Sorry, I was reading the chat.
The Wise Up Action article?
Yeah, give me just a second to actually do this the right way. Boom. And I believe this Saturday we're going to be having the filmmaker on the Vigil. I believe if it's not this Saturday, it's next Saturday. Yeah, a beautifully crafted short documentary made by journalist and filmmaker Pablo Navarrete. And this is just the event thing. There's not a synopsis. I would love to be able to play this trailer. I would. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to hear it. What I'll do is try. And please let me know in the chat if you're able. Jesus, if you're able to hear it. Come on. I'll even turn up a little bit.
Welcome back.
Good to see you, Mo. Good. The last time we met, we were outside Westminster.
Are you able to describe, let's say, for people who don't know or who can't know, what it's like as a father to go through what you're going through or what you've been through?
Oh, well, it's, you get a bit driven, Mo. The greater the insults to Julian and members of my family, the stronger I become, and the more determined. So I no longer count the cost.
So I'm gonna play the second one here real quick, just short little clips. Oh no, that's a picture. So yeah, there we have it. That's your teaser for the no extradition films. Again, I'm not 100% certain if it'll be this Saturday or the following Saturday, but that documentary filmmaker Pablo Navarrete will be on the Vigil. Very much looking forward to talking to him and having a discussion. Krish, when you're researching the Espionage Act, if you're not done, I highly recommend that you go watch the DEA campaign panel from last Saturday with Laurie Love and Jeffrey Sterling and God damn it, Barry Pollock.
Okay.
Who's one of Julian's U.S. attorneys. And
Hey, can I just mention something about the documentary, just real quick, like while people
no.
watch that? Really, dude? But they're selling tickets for that. It premieres on this Thursday, the 13th. And a quarter of the tickets go to the Committee to Defend Julian Assange. So anybody who wants to buy tickets for that, please do so. That helps, raise money for helping Julian face this ridiculous nightmare scenario that he's in. So, and it's a 32-minute film. So, Thursday the 13th is when it premieres online.
And I would recommend trying to get other people to watch it with you. If you have friends that are mildly political that would be interested in coming over and sitting down at your house and watching a 32-minute documentary about Julian, invite them. Because I think it would go a really, really long way to.
And then play our teach-in videos immediately afterwards.
Yes. Or before, pregame it.
Or before.
Yeah.
Yeah. We suck at promoting, so if I remember to do it, I'm going to do it.
Dude, I was just really proud of myself that I remembered to mention the show that I do with Jesse, and then I was just sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, I didn't even say the name of the show.
No, you did. You did.
Did I? Did I really?
Yeah.
Yes. Victory. Yeah. I'm so terrible at self-promotion.
Yeah, we're really bad at trying to get the word out.
No, to the point of this documentary is, I think that's one of the aspects of it I don't think a lot of people really consider is what the family is going through, and putting yourself in their shoes. Like,
his mama breaks my heart. His mother
every day.
Oh, yeah. Breaks me. It breaks me. Like, it's honestly almost painful. Like, I follow her on Twitter, and she'll send me stuff in DMs that she wants to get out there and stuff. And I obviously always retweet everything that she sends me, but it's honestly almost hard for me to follow her because every day I see her tweets and I think about what that is and what she goes through. And I can't even wrap my head around it. Even being a mom, I can't wrap my head around, the situation that she finds herself in and that her son finds himself in. Like, that's truly devastating.
I'm honestly impressed with, I don't know what the right word would be, but with the way that she deals with trolls, because she's one of the people that is the most affected by troll accounts going after her constantly. And it's disgusting to see, but she does it with such grace and poise that when the little people do it, the little people respond and correct them. But when the big trolls come through, like that one bitch that essentially said she was going to vomit knowing that Julian had kids with Stella Morris. It was relatively wonderful to see the way that she managed to slam that person down without even having to say mean things about that person.
Yeah, I admire her for that for sure, because I don't possess that skill. She always, tries to encourage Julian supporters to always respond with, and be polite and all of that. But I don't believe in civility politics. And as much as I would like to honor her by doing that, I just think civility is killing everybody. And I don't have that in me. And she really is kind of amazing at handling those kind of people, and she's just so committed to the facts that she can handle any of the smears that get thrown at her. It's like she just allows it to kind of, I know it doesn't roll off of her back, but she is able to address it in a completely fact-based manner and not resort to turning things into, being nasty or anything like that, which I'm 100% guilty of all the time. And she's amazing at staying away from that.
I'm going to say two things and then I'm going to have to jump off. I do my best to stay as civil as possible. Only because there's a chance that I might get through. They don't have to agree with me, but at least they might understand it. But my caveat to that is, once they start getting shitty, that's about the time that I hop up. I have a bad temper at times, and I can say some pretty awful things, and that's not a part. That's not on a personal level. It's not a side of myself that I particularly like, because it's bad. Like if I'm gonna go and be an uncivil asshole, it's I'm gonna go for how can I psychologically destroy you as a person for the next, I don't know, 10 years. Let's just say 10 years. You'll never stop thinking about my comment. It's like that's not a part of myself that I particularly like. I try to stay as civil as I can, but once they start, like I had somebody coming after me about one of the videos I put up about not voting any blue no matter who, and it's something that I've said for years, and it's not anything new. And this person apparently has been following me for years, and within, I don't know, the third comment, it got real shitty, and they were levying insults at me, and I was basically like, okay, well, you don't have to follow me anymore. Like, I'm giving you permission to go away, and that's where I left it, because if I was going to continue any further, I knew I was going to let my temper get the better of me. And civility is exhausting. It's really, really hard, especially when the person you're trying to be civil to has no intention of being civil to. So people call me uncivil because I have anti-war material, and I go after certain politicians that are not, and I call them war hawks and sociopaths, and they think that sort of stuff is uncivil. And to me, I'm like, well, that's me being as civil as I possibly can be to somebody that wants to blow up a country full of people that look like me. So, civility is out the window in that regard. So to the point of Julian Assange's mom, and the second point that I wanted to make was, it is amazing that she can be civil to the people that come after her in this way, because I don't see this being a controversial issue. What's going on to Julian Assange? I don't see a way that you can sit there and demonize this guy. That you might not like his personality, you might not like the way that he says things, but what he has revealed to me, there is no argument that what he has revealed is the crimes of the elites, and that is what the argument should always be. But people don't want to do that. So when they don't, and she still stays civil, and what his father's going through, and what his kids are going through, and what his fiance is going through, it humanizes him, because it's something that I think the trolls have a really hard time. Like, how do you justify going after somebody's mom who has to witness their kid going through psychological torture and like physically degrading? There's really no way that you can sit there and try to.
It's a slow motion execution. She's literally watching her son being executed slowly over time in front of her eyes, and there's nothing she can do about it. And I can't imagine anything more horrifying.
My wager would be that these trolls don't watch anything but corporate media, right? They're the people that are watching CNN and MSNBC and all these other news networks that constantly bash and smear it all the time, and that's what they're watching. And those networks have no regard, no inkling to humanize Julian Assange in any way. So they don't talk about Stella Morris. They're not talking about his parents or his kids or the people around him that are personally affected by this, because why would they? They don't want to humanize the guy. They don't want to show that, what he did took a lot of guts, and he knew that he was going to be in the crossfires of some pretty powerful people. So I think that it's even more important that as much as we talk about, yes, it is not the fact that Julian Assange is somebody that you might not want to have a beer with. Doesn't fucking matter. What matters is what he revealed. And what matters is the psychological and physical toll that he's going through, as well as his family. And if that becomes the narrative, then it's I don't see how you couldn't be on his side. But again, corporate media doesn't want that narrative. And once you kind of see that corporate media doesn't want that narrative, where do you go? And it's coming over to this stuff, right? Coming over to the independent journalists and the comedians that talk about them and saying, oh, well, maybe I've got it wrong, and opening your eyes to something different, something interesting. And it is going to be difficult, because when you kind of rattle and shake your whole worldview, you got to rebuild from the ground up, and that's not something that a lot of people are willing to go through. And it's like, shit, I never considered myself to be a Democrat. I never aligned myself up with the party, or I've never aligned myself up with any party, period. But when I was a kid, like in my early 20s, I thought the Democrats were the good guys, right? I think a lot of people did. I thought MSNBC was like a real news network. And again, a lot of people did. And once I started seeing the system for what it was, I mean, it was devastating to the point where I didn't want to do political comedy because it was depressing, and I didn't know what to do as a comedian, as a person. And it is building yourself from the ground up. So I get that it's difficult, and I get that it's scary, but I think it's absolutely necessary for all of us to challenge what we know and challenge how we have become complacent within the status quo, and that's okay. And if the issue starts with Julian Assange, great. You should listen to what his parents have to say, and what Stella Morris has to say, and what Julian's friends have to say, and what his colleagues have to say about him, over what a CNN reporter that was given a fucking report from Mike Pompeo has to say, because that guy has no skin in the game for this, other than the fact that he's a journalist and will say some shit about press freedoms, and that's about it. So if this is shaking you to your core, good. That's okay, because there's enough people who have already been shaken to the core, and we will help you figure out where to go. And I'm sure there's stuff that I've said that people disagree with, and people that I like. I mean, whenever I hang out with Lee Camp, there's usually one point where we're sitting in the car together, and we'll disagree with each other, and we'll yell at each other and call ourselves some names, and then at the end of the day, we'll be like, yeah, I guess I see what you're saying, and that's it.
So I just want to say, Krish, I always appreciate when you come on with us, and I'm really looking forward to Friday. If you could let people know where they can find you and how to support you.
Yeah, the easiest way to find all of my stuff is right on my website, which is krishmohanhaha.com. That's KRISHMOHANHAHA.com. There's a donate page where you can become a sustaining member if you have the ability to do that right now, or make a one-time donation. But another big way that I'm kind of earning a living right now is by doing these virtual shows on Friday nights. So the next one is August 14th, 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're free, come on out. Half the tickets will be donated to the Action for Assange GoFundMe.
Well, thank you very much for joining us, Krish.
Thank you for having me. It's always a good time.
Absolutely. I always love having you. You are one of our most frequented guests. I think you and Jason Bermas are the two highest, probably followed by Mohammed El-Mazi. So I think we're wrapping up for this evening. We don't really have many other articles to touch on or anything. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to thank Jason for hopping on earlier and Krish for hopping on now. And I just want to point people back. I'll put it in the link one more time, or in the chat one more time, the link to the schedule for DC. Please make arrangements. If you can join us for an hour, a day, a week, or the whole time, we would love to have you. Yeah, thank you to everybody. Thanks, Josh and Kimber, for all the hard behind-the-scenes work, as well as the other volunteers and activists behind the scenes that help make this possible, as well as Washington, D.C. possible.
My name's Misty Winston. You can find me on Twitter at Sarcasm Stardust. Don't forget to donate to the GoFundMe page for the crew to get to DC. They're really close to their goal. If you can't donate, just share it. because the more eyes on it, then the more people who can donate will see it. And obviously, if you can make it to the show, Krish's show on Friday, that also helps the crew get to DC. Thank you, Krish, for doing that. Thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to Jason also earlier. Jason's always a great guest. I'm hopeful that the next time we talk to him, he has a David Bowie conspiracy theory for us. That would be fun. I love David Bowie. But yeah, so just, thanks everybody for joining us in the chats and, for supporting the show and the crew and for, fighting for Assange. So yeah, thanks guys.
My name's Steve Poikonen. I host a show called Slow News Day. If you're looking for it on YouTube, you type in Slow News Day podcast into your search bar. I'm also on Rockfin and Live. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight. This is incredibly important that the closer we get to September 7th, we pack as many people into a chat as we can, and that turns into packing the streets of Washington, D.C. with all of our happy asses. Big thanks to Bermas and to Krish, my co-hosts, Andrew and Jazz Andrew and Misty, and to Sleepy Josh and Mean Panda. We will see you guys Saturday. Oh no, we should see you Friday in Krish's show. I know that I will be on for that. Andrew, I think you said you could make it for that.
I'll be able to be there for that.
Okay, and
I'll be there for that. I'll come. I'll be there.
Yeah, kick ass.
I'm in.
So the more the merrier with that, really. And they are, man, they're fun. Like I've thoroughly enjoyed myself hanging out for those. So yeah, hopefully we see you Friday. Good luck to us all.